This meeting of the Consolidated Planning Board is called to order. With 6 members present, we have a quorum. Good evening and welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Board. The Consolidated City of Helena and Lewis and Clark County Planning Board serves in an advisory capacity to both the City Commission and the County Commission. This evening, we will be holding a public hearing on the proposed Grasslands Estates Subdivision 4 and Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 subdivision and variance applications. Under the State Subdivision and Planning Act and the City and County Subdivision Regulations, the Planning Board must consider all relevant evidence relating to the public health, safety, and welfare to recommend whether the plat should be approved with conditions, or disapproved by the governing body. The primary review criteria for most subdivisions include the impact on agriculture, agricultural water user facilities, local services, the natural environment, wildlife habitat, and public health and safety, as well as compliance with the local subdivision regulations. Please note that the Board of County Commissioners will hold a public meeting on Thursday, September 3rd at 9 a.m. for the Grasslands Estates Subdivision 4. Public testimony will not be taken during this public meeting. However, the County Commissioners accept public comment on the items on their agenda. Also note that the Board of County Commissioners will hold a public meeting on Tuesday, September 15th at 9 a.m. for the Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 subdivision. Public testimony will not be taken during this public meeting. However, the County Commissioners accept public comment on the items on their agenda. The procedures we will follow in this public hearing are as follows. 1. The Board will first hear a report on the subject from the planning staff, which will include a recommendation regarding the action to be taken by the Board. The staff has prepared a report on the subdivision proposal. 2. The Board will then hear and or receive oral or written statements from the applicant and the applicant's agents and or employees. 3. The Board will then hear and or receive written statements from the public, including proponents, opponents, neutral parties, or anyone wishing to make a general statement or comment on the subject. Public testimony may be presented in any order. Once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, the public testimony portion of the hearing will be closed. 4. The Board will then hear brief final comments, statements, or recommendations from the planning staff. 5. The Board will then hear any brief rebuttal to the comments, testimony, or statements by the staff and the public that the applicant may care to make. 6. The Board will then give staff an opportunity to transition the Board into the decision-making process. 7. Once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, the matter will be open for Board discussion. After discussion, the Board may vote on a recommendation for the items under consideration. The Board may at any time question any person about his or her statements, comments, or testimony. We are also hosting this meeting electronically via the Zoom platform. We ask that you please be patient should we have technical difficulties with this platform. For those of you that are participating via Zoom, we ask you to please keep your microphone muted throughout the meeting unless you are acknowledged and unmuted by the meeting host. This meeting is being recorded. All public comments will become part of the permanent public record. Comments may be made as an audio statement when the host unmutes you. Once called upon, please state your name and address for the record. Some persons are also participating via telephone. If you have joined us by dialing in and would like to make a comment, press *9 to raise your hand, and when you hear the prompt, you have been unmuted. Please slowly state your name and address and make your comment. When you are done speaking, our moderator will return your call to muted. You may raise your hand again by pressing *9. All participants will have an opportunity to speak before previous commenters are allowed to speak again, by permission of the chair. The first item on our public hearing agenda tonight is Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 subdivision. Spencer Stark will present the staff report. However, before staff presents their report, I'd like the applicant or the applicant's representative to state if they have received a copy of the staff report and ask if they are ready to proceed.
Yes.
Applicant, if you could please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Aaron Halford, 6982 Biscaya.
And have you received a copy of the staff report?
Yes.
Are you ready to proceed with this evening's public hearing on your subdivision application and variance applications?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. McNally, is staff ready to begin?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good evening. Greg McNally with the Community Development Planning Department, for the record. Mr. Chair, the Wheat Ridge Estates subdivision phase 4 item is the first item on your agenda, and it's going to be presented by Ms. Connie Diedrich, planner, one in our office. I believe she's ready.
Good evening, Chairman Thomas and planning board members. Thank you in advance for your time and allowing me to present Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 to you this evening. My name is Connie Diedrich, planner with Lewis and Clark County. Also, the applicant, as you just heard, Mr. Halford is here, and his representative, Mr. Prothero, are here this evening. The subject property is located east of East Helena via Highway 12. Up Spokane Creek Road over to Spokane Ranch. So this area outlined in red is the subject property. Over here is a better outset version of that for your review. Current land use is undeveloped agriculture, and adjacent land uses to the north, south, and west are vacant agricultural lands for single-family residential, and to the east is Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 3. Up here you'll see in the aerial, I'd like to point out that Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 1 is located here. 3D Ranchettes is in this area north. Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 2 is located right here. Also, I want to point out the fire protection is located in Phase 2 off of Stubby Road, and then Phase 3 is located here, and the application before you this evening is Phase 4 outlined in black. The application request is for 2 variances, one to exclude portion of right-of-way costs, and the second to pave connectivity to south and west gravel surface versus a paved, and approval of a 36-lot subdivision. Wheat Ridge Estates is a 75.5 acre parcel to be subdivided at 36 lots, approximately 1.7 to 2.7 acre sizes. 4 multi-user wells will serve 9 lots each. The site will be served by individual septic. Off-site fire protection, as I just stated, will be served in Wheat Ridge 2, and combination parkland dedication and cash in lieu. On August 5th, staff presented the project to the City County Parks Board for a combination pedestrian trail easement and cash in lieu. On August 10th, via proxy, the board gave a unanimous decision recommending the combination as proposed by the applicant. Key issues: water. As I stated, 4 multi-user wells will be developed, each serving 9 lots, 250 gallons per day for domestic use, 1,700 gallons per day for lawn and garden at peak times. Well spacing will be 0.25 miles apart. Each well will have a combined appropriation of 9.95 acre feet below the 10 acre feet required for permitting. The wastewater will be individual on-site septic. All lots have had a test hole excavated. 250 gallons per day for single-family residents, with a combined flows of 9,000 per day for the entire site, and flow design will be for 300 to 400 gallons per day. The subject property is located in Zone X. Zone X is an area to be determined to be outside the 500-year flood. A retention pond is required and located to the northeast corner of lot 81-1. Fire, as I stated, was proposed off-site. Fire protection will be located in Wheat Ridge 2. System is located less than 1 mile. services does not cross a major highway. The subject property is located in the Tri-Lakes Fire Service area, and currently the system is owned and operated by the applicant. A traffic impact study was completed, and according to the study, Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 will generate 340 trips per day at build-out. Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 is dedicating 60 feet of right-of-way at time of recordation of final plat. And for the variance, in 2006, Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 2 and 3 were approved under the 2005 county subdivision regulations. At the time of approval, the projects were approved with an adjacent 45-foot right-of-way on Spokane Ranch Road versus the 60-foot right-of-way required by the county subdivision regulations. In 2006, a variance was not requested by the applicant nor considered by the county. So therefore, since the applicant, also the developer of Wheat Ridge Estates 2 and 3, was not required to dedicate the additional right-of-way in 2006, the applicant is requesting a variance to not pay a proportionate share of right-of-way acquisition costs along Spokane Ranch Road abutting Wheat Ridge Estates 2 and 3. So it's this highlighted area right here in yellow. So this is Wheat Ridge 3 and Wheat Ridge 2. The applicant would pay a proportionate share of any impact to off-site roads with the exception of the estimated right-of-way costs adjacent to Wheat Ridge 2 and 3. The county engineer sent a response, and I'd like to read that. The property owner can provide the necessary easement from their northern property boundary and other properties they own for a portion of the roadway without the necessity to acquire any right-of-way from another landowner. However, I don't believe they should be required to include right-of-way acquisition from other property owners in the calculation of prorated share of improvements because they are already encumbered. The proposed internal road, Dryland Loop, which is this one here that goes all the way around, will be paved as well as the east side connector, which is located over here next to phase 3. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow for future connectors, the one to the south and to the west, to be gravel versus paved. So in 2006, there was discussion that ensued regarding the future connectors to be surfaced with gravel versus paved. It was approved as such. Variance was not requested at the time either. To date, the connector for phase 3 right here, this portion, has not been constructed, nor is it gravel. Today, public comment has been received. 2 email comments regarding the proposed development for property owners that are located within the Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 2, and they are included in your packet as Exhibit B. Public noticing, legal notice was published in the Independent Record. Certified letters were sent to adjacent property owners, and 2 public notice signs were posted on the property. Today is the public hearing. This concludes my presentation for the board. Staff has drafted motions for when you're ready for the decision process of the meeting, and at this time I can entertain any questions that you may have for the applicant at this time as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do board members have any questions for staff?
Thank you for that presentation. I have a number of questions regarding this property. I'll start right at the top. Previously, I noticed that it says that the site was previously irrigated, or it was not previously irrigated. Do we know if they've ever had irrigation on that property?
I would have to defer to the applicant on that.
We can then skip that for just a moment. Okay. But I did notice that it is designated as prime farmland under irrigation. So I am curious about that. The water system, it is indicated that there are going to be 4 wells that are serving each of 9 homes. Does that mean that the developer is putting in systems that will actually deliver the water? Or is it that each landowner, lot owner, will be required to drill their own well?
Again, I'll defer to the engineer and the applicant for that, but I do believe they're going to do a public water system of some kind, but they can probably best answer that question.
So maybe this is just queuing these up for you guys. The third question is in regard to the trails, the pedestrian trails. I'm wondering if those are actually constructed or simply an easement. And will they be paved, constructed trails, or basically just saying that this area is dedicated for the trails?
When I was out on site, I did not see like a specific area, but again, it was kind of, the grass is a little overgrown right there, so there might be trails, but again, I would refer to the applicant.
Okay. And then the final question that I have is when you just showed the map or I believe it was the Google Earth photo of phase 3, has phase 3 already been entirely built out and all the lots have been sold?
There's only a few lots that have been sold. I know that the improvements are done except for that one connector that I saw when I was out there. Again, that's probably for the applicant to answer that, but in order for them to find a plat, they would have had to have improvements in. Okay.
Any further board member questions for staff? Mr. Helfert, this is your opportunity to present your comments regarding the staff report, draft findings of fact, and draft positions. Please approach the podium.
Did I have name, address again?
No, we have that for the record.
Okay. So, questions?
Would you like me to read the question?
If you wouldn't mind, yeah.
Okay, so do you know if this property has been previously reviewed?
Has not,
Not ever?
no, not in the history that I went out there. I lived out in that area for many years. My grandfather used to own that property.
Okay. So is it actually producing wheat on the
Yes.
field now? Okay, dry land, okay. Tell me more about the water systems.
So we will install the water system, drill the wells and put water lines stuck into each lot so that the builder or owner will just have to tap into that line at the street and run it to their house and then have water.
Okay, so when I do the calculations, you say that you have 2.52 acre feet divided by 9 homes. It's basically 0.28 acre feet per year for domestic use.
Mhm.
And then you indicated 7.43 acre feet total for each well for lawn and garden. So I'm struggling a little bit when we think about the lot sizes and how much water people will really be using out there, because that is one of our biggest concerns. What do those lots look like? Let's say it's a 1.7 acre lot. If their total water use is less than an acre foot per year for irrigating. Now, what do you see those lots looking like in terms of landscaping and weed management?
As far as what type of, or how large their lawn and stuff could be, I think I have to 20 answer that. But they will be limited to what they can have. I mean, there's only so much water going to each lot, so they are limited.
So tell me how you are gonna monitor how much water is going to each lot.
I do not know.
Okay.
I don't know if when we apply to DEQ, or to the NRC, they have something for us, or I don't know.
They do not, in my understanding.
Oh, okay.
So I have some concerns about how you would measure and monitor to ensure that each of those households is not exceeding the amount of water that's been allocated.
Sure.
So, and then what about the pedestrian trails?
In phase 2 and 3, there was just, the land is there with an easement, and phase 4 would be the same, so there are no improved actual paths there.
Are they connected?
Yes,
And are they just, help me, are they in the borrow pit? Are they?
no, they're not in the borrow pit, they're on an actual lot that's there,
It's just one lot?
the lots that they all run across,
Uh-huh.
so there's 8 lots that they go through.
That the trail goes through?
Mhm. Yeah,
Have you
but they're
ever
not improved.
considered sort of improving those and putting any signage or doing something to?
I have not talked about it, no.
And then tell me more about why, if we have phase 3 that is not entirely built out or the lots aren't sold, why are we starting into phase 4?
Looking into the future.
How long have you, when did you do phase 3?
Phase 3 started, I believe, in 18. I'd have to double check, but it was either 17 or 18.
Okay, are all the lots sold in phases 1 and 2?
I do not currently own anything in either of those subdivisions.
Are there vacant lots in those
I
subdivisions?
believe both subdivisions have 1 or 2, possibly 3 vacant lots.
And then, so how many are still available in phase 3?
I would have to double check with my notes that there's probably around half.
And of the ones that are sold, how many have been built on? Or are under construction?
All but 3.
I'm just trying to get an idea of the demand. Sorry, if I feel like it sounds like I'm grilling you.
Sure, no, from the research that I have and what's been going on with housing right now, there's a big demand for lots.
Then one last, if you don't mind. Thinking about the water, what kinds of water systems do you have in those existing phases?
Individual wells,
They're all on individual wells?
Yes.
And individual septic?
yes.
So you haven't done this before where you're gonna be doing a multi-system, multi-user system?
I have, one of the first subdivisions I ever did was a municipality in East Helena.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions from the board for the applicant? Mr. Hilford, did you have any statements you wish to offer?
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about, first the variance on Spokane Ranch Road with the easements. When that phase 2 and 3 was preliminary plat approved, we didn't have any conditions that stated that we needed to have a 60-foot easement there. And that would have been the ideal time to do it. So now, 15 or so years later, because it wasn't asked for then, now I'm expected to do it, and it doesn't make sense to me. The 3 lots that I own in phase 3 that border Spokane Ranch Road, I haven't had no problem letting you guys put an easement on that, on those 3 lots. But as far as phase 2 goes, the ideal time to have done that was during final plat, and I don't understand why it wasn't done then, or asked to be done by at that time from either the county or the planner that was on that, but she's not with the county anymore. So it's hard for me to justify, why that's like that and why I have to participate in that. It doesn't seem right to me. And then on the other variants, so out of the 3 phases that are in place right now, phase 1 has 2 future access roads that are gravel that lead to nowhere. Phase 2 has 3 access roads, one of which leads to nowhere and it's gravel. The other 2 were gravel, and I paved those for phase 3. And phase 3 has 3 access roads, and 1 is paved and the other 2 aren't even there. I mean, they're there legally on the plot, but they're not in place. So the consistency there's no consistency there. I don't understand that. So it's kind of hard to say, and I don't have a problem putting them in place. I just would like to gravel them versus putting asphalt on.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for me. So, Mr. Halpert, I need to understand this a little bit better. The roads that we're looking at that are gravel currently, they are basically like ingress and egress, emergency ingress and egress. They're not being used for anything? What's the?
They're not being used for anything, they're there specifically for future development of adjoining property.
Okay, so then my next question might be, are there plans? Do you own the property to the west?
I do not. I currently have no plans to develop. I do plan to develop more out there, but we're probably going to be coming from a different direction. It's hard to say.
So we're not planning Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 5?
No,
It'll be called something else?
I don't. I do plan on doing more subdivisions, but I can't say what we're going to be calling them.
I'm sorry, but it'll be maybe adjacent, but not where these roads might go.
Yeah, and if we do butt up against one of these two phases and we need the road for access, I mean, it's going to have to be built.
Are there fences at the ends of these roads, or can people actually drive into the subdivision across those roads?
Are you talking about phase 2 or 3
Or
or 4?
any of them?
Most of them have fences.
So people aren't actually driving on them?
Correct. Correct.
Most
Not
of
all of them have fences though.
them? Not all of them? Will they in phase 4?
No, one no.
Mr. Halpert, were you done with yours?
I'd like to bring up one other thing.
Please go ahead.
I believe it's in the conditions of approval, there's one that says that I need to certify that Spokane Ranch Road was built to county standards back when I paved it. And if I can't certify it, then there's other recommendations that I have to follow. So when I paved that road, the county was involved in it. The planner was involved in it. My other engineer was involved in it. And there's really no reason why that road should have to be reevaluated and inspected. I mean, it was completely built to county standards back then. It was signed off by the county, and it doesn't make sense that now it's being brought up again because it was built to standards back then.
Is that all? Okay, thank you, sir. We are ready to accept public testimony. Please come forward to the podium and state your name and address. If you are on Zoom, if you're on the phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. We'll hear the prompt by unmuting, then you can start speaking. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand so that you can enter the queue to begin speaking. We'll begin with our first commenter here in chambers.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time for me to talk, but I'm Tony Prothero. I'm the applicant's engineer. I'm with J. Markey Engineers, and our address is 1093 Elm Avenue. And I can maybe shed a little bit of light on some of your questions. So regarding the water systems, it is true, there are no requirements for metering, but the only thing that we can do is to limit lawn and garden area, and that's done in the covenants, and that's up to the homeowners basically to enforce. At this point, the NRC has no ability to police this sort of thing. They do for permitted wells, but not for exempt wells at this time. So it's a bit of an issue that the homeowners will have to police it on their own. there's no really other way that I'm aware of to be able to do that. We could put a meter on each water system, and we would consider doing something like that. And at least you can see cumulatively if they're exceeding the 10 acre foot requirement. And then I guess you could take it a step further and put a meter on each household to determine if each one of them, if there is a violator, maybe you could track it down that way. That would be the only way to be able to determine if there was an exceedance of some kind. I also wanted to talk about, let's see, just maybe a little bit more about variance number 2. So the roads that lead to the adjoining properties. I use this one, so you see it there. Maybe. So this road right here, it leads to another wheat field to the east right now. So there's no connecting road over here at all right now. There would be no reason for anybody at this point, other than, you know, this landowner over here to be in that area. And then same with this one right here. It just leads to an undeveloped field. So the idea here is that well, if we combine that with the fact that the zoning, the Helena Valley planning area zoning is, we think, forthcoming, and those would make these areas roughly 10 acre lots. And if these areas were to develop, but, you know, 10 acre lots, you know, according to the subdivision regulations, require gravel roads. Whereas, you know, if the lots are 2.5 acres or smaller in size, they would be required to be paved. So I mean, we have gravel roads that intersect with paved roads all over the place, you know. So I mean, to me, it just makes sense that we would be able to put a road in place here without paving it, not knowing what this developer, or if this developer will ever do, or, you know, this landowner will ever develop on either side. And the road is in place there, so somebody can't just, well, to discourage somebody from actually putting a building or something like that inside the road easement. And but it doesn't necessarily serve as a mechanism for providing legal and physical access to any of the lots of the subdivision. So to me, it just makes sense that we would be able to leave those in gravel. So that's the reason for the variance request. And then regarding the first variance request for the proportionate share of the proportionate share calculation to not include right-of-way acquisition. I think the applicant, in good faith, tried to do those on phases 2 and 3. In good faith, tried to comply with the conditions of approval that were laid in front of him when that one was approved. And at the time, the right-of-way could have been donated if it was required, but little to no cost to the applicant. It's just another line on the plat. Now it's much more complicated because he has to pay the proportionate share on a developed lot. So those lots are much more valuable. And so, you know, I feel like we tried to come up with some solutions and some alternatives, and I think Connie had mentioned that if he owns any of the lots up against Spokane Ranch Road, that he could go ahead and dedicate an additional 15 feet of right of way. And person as Mr. Halpert had indicated that he was willing to consider that and possibly do that. But the ones that are developed in phase two, there's yards and those are part of their homes now, so I mean, they're a lot more valuable. So having said that, I just felt like the easiest, the simplest way to resolve this was to go ahead and ask for variance. And, you know, if it were approved, then I guess we're, you know, the issue is moved, but, you know, if not, then we have to deal with it. Anyhow, that's just all I had for the time being. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No, sorry, I didn't, sorry.
Oh, okay, we do have a question.
Yes, Ann Schlen again. I commend you guys for, thinking about putting those wells in and actually providing water to the homes, because I think that, is going to be a better approach in the long run. And I know that creates some additional cost, in the building of the infrastructure and needing to supply that, but I would say thank you for doing it, because a lot of developers aren't considering it. But once again, I'm concerned about the lot size and how we sort of rectify how much water they're using for irrigation for their lawns and gardens, where they're going to have much larger areas that can't be irrigated. And so I would just encourage that you're really thinking about that weed management plan and sort of vegetation management, because when you're going from a production field to construction sites, I anticipate that you're going to have a fair number of problems with that. And I would also like to see that you actually make recommendations to the homeowners association about what size areas can be irrigated given the amount of water. And maybe give them some calculations to be working with. And I really support the recommendation of metering the wells so that we know that we're not exceeding those, because that's going to be really difficult to monitor per household. So it'd be good if you just had a general idea that could go to the homeowners association. Thinking about the variance, is it possible that those pedestrian trails is that trail along that, is it along Spokane Road?
Okay, right,
Yes.
outside.
Would it be thinking about the variance on that if part of that easement in that area was used for the trails that was actually mowed and maintained and really treated like a trail rather than simply the easement for the trail? That would personally, I would feel better about that variance request. And then the last question that I have is one of the things I know that we have just approved a new 3,000 acre conservation easement out in that area, but I'm not sure where that is within the vicinity, and I've been wondering if anyone can help me with that.
It's across, so this Logan and Ranch, Spencer Stark, Clarence County are process that application. So it's across the street here, running this area.
So it's actually on the other side of the creek?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Could I have one more thing to what you were saying, that there are recommendations in the covenants that tell you how much lawn garden area you're allowed to have. So, I mean, somebody could, with fairly easy, simple tools, be able to estimate the amount of area that they're irrigating. So that is part of the solution as well.
Right, and thinking on that, I think you may run into more trouble because you're adjacent, let's say phase 3,
Yeah.
those people are all on individual wells. They will have more potential to irrigate larger portions of their parcel. And that may create some problems with your phase 4.
We find that today's demographic doesn't want a 2-acre lot or 2-acre, for the most part anyways, they don't want 2-acre lawns. So, We're hoping that those type of people wind up in here, but yes, I understand.
Okay, but I would like to know actually what that amount is in the covenants, if you could come up with that, okay,
I believe it's 10,000 square feet, but I can confirm that for you.
thank you.
Almost a quarter of an acre.
Any additional questions from the board? Okay, thank you, sir. All right, do we have any other comments in chambers? No, let's go ahead and move to our Zoom list. Ms. Rutherford? Ms. Chambers, if you would please go ahead and just restate your name and confirm your address for the record, please.
Certainly, board. Can you guys all hear me correctly?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So again, my name is Jenny Chambers, Chambers, and I live at 2160 Crested Wheat Loop. And just for clarification, you guys are referring to that as Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 2. But I wanted to provide some clarification. I was able to provide written comment prior to the deadline on Monday at 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to reiterate all of my comments, but I do want to clarify a few things. Wheat Ridge Phase 2, which is referred to as Crested Wheat Loop, is not managed by the applicant and is no longer served by the developer or any orientation from his support of. We are a homeowners association. We formed a homeowners association probably over 10 years ago for Wheat Ridge Phase 2 or Crested Wheat Loop, and have been operating and managing the 40 lots as a homeowners association with pretty successful participation and effort as a community long-term. We just want to provide clarification that the fire suppression system that was referred to as part of Wheat Ridge Phase 3 is actually may have been platted with Phase 3 as far as when it was originally approved, because I believe Phase 2 and Phase 3 were both done at the same time. However, it was constructed and has been maintained by the Crested Wheat Loop Homeowners Association for over 10 years and actually falls within the boundary of Wheat Ridge Phase 2 or Crested Wheat Loop. The HOA is the one that has been maintaining that with the support of the Tri-County Fire Department, and the current applicant or developer has not had any support or participation in that fire suppression system. We did not object or have any concerns with the Wheat Ridge Phase 3 and that current development has only been started a couple years ago. Because it was originally platted and we all were aware that that was something that was going to be a long-term use of that particular structure, but do have concerns with the latest proposal and the amount of water that would be needed for fire truck and fire suppression systems if there were fires adjacent to the property, because it is agricultural and you know, a lot of weed management issues like you guys have mentioned. And then the homes out here are a little bit larger scale. And if there was a fire in the agricultural fields and then a fire in one of the homes, we don't believe that that fire suppression system would be able to account for all of the particular areas on use. So that's something I just wanted to clarify. I lived in this residence for more than 10 years and been part on and off of the HOA as time progresses. The other thing I wanted to mention is I do think that there's a need for the county planning board to look harder at the environmental assessment. I raised some concerns with this in my comments and was directed that I needed to contact the engineer or the developer themselves based upon questions on noise, traffic, water use, wastewater, weed management. And I know there's also wildlife in this area and those concerns. I think it would be prudent that there was an independent local government looking at the environmental assessment and how things were evaluated, and not just require a homeowner to contact a developer or developer's engineer to get the answer that of course they're going to want us to hear versus having a good analysis of what's being done. I would have looked at the files and got that information to make my own determination, but there was not adequate public notice. I was aware of the public notice on August 9th, and comments were due by 5 o'clock on August 10th. And then I received a response from the county on some of my time frame questions on the 12th of August. And then you now are having this public meeting. So it might also be good if you would extend the public comment period and look harder at these information requests, or at least just deny the application, go back to the developer to do something more robust and address some of your concerns that you guys have as well, versus the water use, the lot sizes, and some of the access issues that you guys have also raised. So I'm not going to reiterate my comments. Appreciate you guys taking the time and allowing public to provide comment. And thank you for your support on the Lewis and Clark County Board.
Thank you. Do we have another public comment on Zoom? Okay. Is there any further public testimony about this specific matter? Okay, that ends the public comment period for this item. I'm sorry.
I have a comment, but not as a public.
Okay, go ahead. Come back up to the podium, Mr. Helmer.
So, as far as the water supply for the fire department that Ms. Chambers was talking about, so I have two roles. One, I'm the developer out there, and two, I'm the assistant chief of Tri Lakes Volunteer Fire Department. So that water supply was fully constructed, built, and paid for by me, and it was built to county standards as far as water flow. There's two water supplies out in that area. There's one on phase 1 and there's one on phase 2. And combined they equal about 200,000 gallons of water, just under 200,000 gallons of water. So there's a lot of water out there for fire suppression. I have proof that I have been maintaining that site. I have power bills from years and years back. I've done maintenance on it. And I can prove that by the bills I paid. So I'm not sure where she's coming up that they maintained that and built it, but I did. So, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the board ready to offer any motions about these items?
Mr. Chairman, can there be board discussion before that? Can we ask staff questions? I thought I was waiting for that part of the agenda, and I got confused.
Yes, we can go back to staff discussion. Go ahead.
I would like the staff to address what you know about the fire suppression system out there. What have you found out?
What I can do is pull up. The email should be from the comments in your email in your packet from the fire district.
I read that.
Otherwise, I'm going to have to just defer to the engineer as far as how it was constructed, besides what I have actually in the report.
So when phases 1, 2, and 3 were developed, was the fire suppression system anticipated for this phase as well? Is that in the records?
No, I'd have to go back. I've looked at all the records for 2 and 3. I would have to, I never really pulled that part out, so I would actually have to go back and check in order to answer that question for you.
Are you and is the fire department out there satisfied that if this use of this phase taps into that water supply that it's adequate?
According to the fire department's comments, they didn't have any issue with it. I'm not an engineer, so I wouldn't be able to answer the other question as far as that goes.
Thank you.
Apologize.
Mr. Chair, I have one question for staff. And it's
maybe it's my misunderstanding, but what exactly is the purpose for the easement along Spokane Ranch Road? Is it for future widening of the road, or utilities, or trails?
So you mean the 60 feet that we require?
Yes.
Per our regulations, so it's also based on public works regulations. I maybe have to, since I'm pretty new, I might have to have Greg help me with that question. I know originally, so I can go back to so 3D Ranchettes, they actually have 60 feet. And again, let me go to, there we go. So when this area is put in, there's 60-foot right of way. But then when we come to 2 and 3, or excuse me, it's right here. 2 and 3, for whatever reason at the time, even though it was required in our subdivision regulations, they were allowed to just do 45 feet. Now, whether the 45 plus the 15 that they put in, which is actually 20 for pedestrian easement, you know, we weren't here. Just by reading the files, it was just approved that way, no variances were ever asked for or approved. So I really can't answer the questions. What we're trying to do is abide, because we don't know what the future holds, right? So we're looking at the fact that to do a 60-foot right of way, to continue that, because if they keep developing westward, or you start developing southward, even with the proposed zoning, somebody might come in and request a planned area development, since this area is already developed, and we don't want to have to try to acquisition later. So I think that was the whole purpose, and they have, like for phase 4, they have on the plat, it will be dedicated 60-foot right away plus a 15-foot pedestrian easement. So I think what we're asking, part of one of the variances, and Mr. Halford, the applicant, referred to that, and Tony, is that we were saying, since you own 3 lots still in phase 3, can we get the 15-foot to make it 60, and then later, if we have to go back and acquisition the rest, that might be a potential possibility. But as far as knowing what the future holds, we don't, but that's what planning is for, is to actually get the right of way just for future benefit and use. Is that?
Thank you.
Excuse me, I have another question. So if the access roads were allowed to remain gravel, who then later pays the cost of paving if they should need to be paved?
That is the question, and I would have to defer, because that is, I think, was one of the recommended responses from the county engineer, is who would pay for that? If, you know, would it be another developer that goes in and connects to the west side or the south side? Would it be them to come in on phase 4 to pave? That's the question, if the variance stands as requested.
Well, what's happened in the past when something like this has come up, where you have a gravel road within a completed subdivision and someone needs to abut it and access it, who's paying then for the paving?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mrs. Diedrich, if you don't mind. The subdivision regulations have evolved considerably in regard to this realm. Previously, we have, through the planning process and through the subdivision review process, required connectivity to adjacent properties and simply required the easement. So an easement of the road. And then when future connectivity were to occur, we would rely on that future development to provide that connection and build that road. We've since evolved doing that way, because we've run into issues in the past where we've had encroachments into those easements, and we've had difficulty then building that road when it's needed. And so to address that issue, we have required developers to build on-site roads, whether they're internal for the lots or they're for future connectivity. And that way we avoid that issue for future development. It's constructed, it's ready, and available for adjacent development to connect to without any, hopefully, future improvements to that road. As you know, you might know in our subdivision regulations right now, we have, again, in our public works manual, we have several road standards, a gravel standard, a paved standard, and a couple other standards for minor collectors and arterials. Typically, you'll see the local road standards of gravel or paved. And in the county, if you are doing a subdivision and you're creating lots greater than 2 acres and you're under 400 trips per day, you'll still do a paved road. In the past, if you were under 400 trips per day, you would just do a gravel road. So if a smaller development were to connect up to this project, its traffic generation is what would guide what would get constructed, rather than that particular regulation, because that deals with on-site roads. So if a subdivision were to build a paved road, a paved internal road network, right, and then connect up to, say, this road if it were to be gravel, depending on how many trips are coming out of that subdivision and onto this this internal road connection here, it might still be kept in the gravel. So you would have a pavement to a gravel to a pavement. Now that's just a scenario, because we don't really know what type of development is going to occur to the south or to the west. We're just simply providing that opportunity for it to occur with the paved road connection. That's what the regulations currently require.
Any additional questions for staff?
I do, and I'm not sure if you can answer this either, but thinking about, as I'm reading through our report and our findings, I find it really interesting and thinking about, given our zoning discussions of late and our concern about water and water availability. And I know we have some concerns out in that area about some water. We're looking at DNRC has been looking into that and doing a study in that region at the moment. I'm wondering why we don't require a more in-depth analysis of water availability on the site. We require a preliminary engineering report for the fire system and for, there was something else that we require that on. But for whatever reason, we're not requiring that through the county. Is that unprecedented? I mean, have we not required in the past a greater analysis than, sorry, I'm just going to read, when I read this, it says a 24-hour aquifer study was conducted and the yield demonstrated by the nearest wells, doesn't even say the wells are on site, in the area indicate a high probability that the proposed wells will yield at least 35 gallons a minute. I need to know what that high probability is and what are we basing that on, because that concerns for water availability. So can we require a water study?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mrs. Diedrich, if you don't mind, when we start talking about some of these things about the growth policy, we talk about our subdivision regulations and what we can require. We also have to be able to comply with our state statutes. And our state statutes have strict, clear rules on water and wastewater requirements for subdivision. And the state has those rules, and often we acquiesce to the state's review for those issues. We have identified in our growth policy this discussion about this limitation that you're kind of talking about. How can we go above and beyond what the state's requiring? And the state does, in the state law, allow you to do that. You have to have peer-reviewed studies to support that type of regulation. But what you're talking about is we have to get those peer-reviewed studies. Those peer-reviewed studies have to support additional regulation, and we have to adopt that additional regulation into our process. And I think our growth policy kind of really hits home that right now we're just not prepared to do that. And that's a limitation of the current development rules and regulations that we act under in regards to, because you alluded water specifically. And that's one of the reasons why we have, you saw zoning proposed and considered zoning that has a minimum lot size of 10 acres, right? And just to lower the amount of lots that we're seeing out in the valley, where we know we have water issues. That's a step one, right? But the growth policy calls for looking at this at a more in-depth level. We're just not quite got there yet.
So do we not have any tools to clarify a little bit or have some better understanding about water availability, depth to aquifer? You know, even if we just had basic information that helped us with this to understand it a little bit better. I mean, I realize we're doing fewer wells, but if we're trying to meet the goals of the growth policy, I don't understand how come we can require engineered design features for parts of it, but not always all of it. And I realize that it is because of state statute and that we need to have some more things in place. Is there nothing we can do in the meantime?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think that we're continually operating under our current subdivision regulations until we can look at doing some peer-reviewed studies and then adopt regulations that then reflect the recommendations of those studies and the information that's learned in those studies. And up until then, we're subject to the subdivision regulations and those state statutes regarding water and wastewater.
I have a follow-up question about the peer-reviewed studies. Can you do them for only certain areas where we may be more concerned about water availability than other areas in the Helena Valley plan?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think that you could certainly adopt subdivision regulations that would be applicable to certain areas in some cases and not applicable to some areas in the other. That's something we could explore in the future. That's something we would continue to look for guidance for to make sure that we could do that, but that idea doesn't sound too far-fetched.
Mr. Chairman, if could I direct another question to Mr. McNally? Mr. McNally, we've heard what the applicants say are the remedies or the potential restrictions regarding water use, lawn size, metering. Is there anything we can require or require the applicants to require in development? For instance, when I was not on this board, I was under the impression that a subdivision development could include limits on lawn sizes on lots. Is my memory bad, my understanding bad?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in the past, based on recommendations from our Water Quality Protection District, we've included covenants that say you're hereby notified that you should limit your irrigation on your property to a certain size, or you should do something to that effect, or you should drill your well to a certain depth or below a certain depth. We've had those types of recommendations included in the conditions of approval. Again, they're just in the restricted notices for future property owners. And again, they're just shoulds. So it's nothing required on our end.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll follow up, another follow-up, Mr. McNally, sorry about this, but thinking along those lines, did we reach out to the Water Quality Protection District and receive any comments?
They were sent a comment form. I did not receive anything back from them. I can try to reach out prior to county commission meeting and see if I can get a response.
Okay, and then is there any way that we can actually require that as part of our subdivision review that we receive? I guess we can't require that we receive comments from them, but ensure somehow that they have seen these applications.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this property, if I'm not mistaken, is not located within the Water Quality Protection District. So our Water Quality Protection District is only so large, and I don't believe this property is included.
Do we have any options for extending the public comment period?
I just want to confirm, Chair and members of the board, I did send a DEQ water quality division, and it did get sent to DNRC water resources division for comment.
Did you receive comments from?
No, I didn't, but a lot of them are not in office and they're working remotely. I think that may have something to do with, not receiving certain comments.
So then were those comments requested electronically or paper mail?
Paper. Some of them are sent paper, some internally they're done via, through our tracking system, and then externally they're sent via mail.
Not electronic.
Correct.
Is that something we could change?
I can find out.
I'm thinking about COVID and how most people are working electronically.
I can check into that.
I mean, did anyone attempt to follow up with either agency via telephone?
No, I have not at this time. I can add that.
Thank you. Is there any other question about the potential for extending public comment period?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I was just looking through Mrs. Dietrich's report to see the deadlines for, and Mrs. Dietrich, you might know, oh, here we go, so.
It's September 29th, would be the end of the 60-day review period.
So your review period for this project, and we are subject to strict timelines with regard to reviewing a project, in this case, 60 days, 60 working days. And to do that, we have to get this public hearing before you, as well as a public meeting before the commission. That's why these times seem so short, particularly for those participating as members of the public. So the review period would end September 29th. We've noticed a public meeting with the county commission on September 15th. You could certainly keep public hearing open if you'd like. However, we'd like to get a recommendation from this board prior to the commission meeting on September 15th, which would mean this board would be meeting another date.
Because at this time, our next meeting is scheduled for September 15th.
That's correct. At this point, yes, you have a regularly scheduled meeting coming up on the 15th of September. And once your recommendation is made, staff needs time to then process that recommendation and prepare it for consideration by the Board of County Commissioners. So I would much prefer to be well in advance of that September 15th date.
If we were to take action tonight, and I'd like to address this question to Mr. McNally. If we were to take action tonight, can we also include that the commissioners would consider additional public comment and could take action that would supplement or reverse or just accept what we do. I mean, nothing that we do tonight would prevent the commission from considering the additional public comment and incorporating that into their decision. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the one rule we want to avoid is new information. The purpose of having the public hearing before this board is for you to consider all relevant information and make a recommendation to the board based on the information you've heard. If the board ends up hearing new information, that ends up triggering a recall back to this location here, just to consider that new information. And that can trip things up a little bit for both the applicant and also time consuming for the public and the board.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, we're now open for board discussion and/or if anyone would like to propose a motion related to these items.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I wonder about people wanting to extend the public timeframe and maybe have another meeting on this. I hate to suggest that because I know that's not always a popular option, but and if people feel strongly that there ought to be more time for public comment, that is one option you can consider.
So does anyone want to propose a motion regarding public comment, or do we want to move forward with one or more motions about what we have before us right now?
Mr. Chair, I would say that staff's reply and basically saying that we can leave the public comment period. I guess we can leave that open while still making a recommendation this evening. I'm not sure that we need to leave this, we need to leave it all the way open. In terms of public comment, we did receive, I just wanted to know what our options were.
Okay, but Mr. McNally, if you would please be so kind as to clarify once again, if we leave the public comment period open, there's a risk that someone could introduce new information, which would mean that this board would have to reconvene prior to September 15th to consider that new information. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I apologize if I've led you to think that, so I just want to clarify. Members of the board, Mr. Chair, if you, and I'm not sure, I'm trying to recall if you actually closed public testimony this evening. I don't know if you did that formally, which might, but if you didn't, you could continue the testimony, leave it open. Any new comments you hear would not be considered new information, just be part of your record, right? If you were to make a recommendation to our Board of County Commissioners, we will take that recommendation to our Board of County Commissioners, and then they will hold a public meeting. If at their public meeting, they hear new information that wasn't considered by this board, then they'll remand it back to you at that point.
Okay, we did close the public comment period.
So given that you've closed the public comment, I think that public testimony is now over. Well, I don't think it's over. You closed it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McNally, people can still go to the Board of County Commissioners and testify. Is this correct?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the members of the public can still comment to our Board of County Commissioners when we hold that meeting. That is correct.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. McNally, there's still a risk that they could hear new information.
There will always be that risk. There will always be that risk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So again, we have these items up to the board for discussion and or proposing motions.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this board accept the findings of fact as presented by staff for the variance order from chapter. I move that this board accept the findings of fact. I think we need to do that first. Is that correct?
Correct. Excuse me, point of order, do we need to vote on the full proposal first and then variances?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the way we've been kind of doing this is, you could do it both ways, but the way we've been ordering them in is the variance actions first. So take action on the variance findings and then the variance conclusions first, and then take action on the subdivision. So Ms. Diedrich has a couple of slides for you, and if she wants to preview them for you, she can. This motion's for this first variance, which is on chapter 11, H3C4, that's regarding the right-of-way issue that the applicant has spoken to.
Mr. Chairman, without objection, I withdraw my motion.
And then the second slide she has is for variance number 2. Can you advance that one? And this would be for the variance on chapter 11H1. This is regarding the gravel roads. And then as she advances the slides again, these would be the motions on the subdivision application itself. And there will be a motion on the findings, a motion on adverse impacts, and then a motion on the conclusion regarding the conditions.
Chairman and members of the board, what I can do is put it on motions for variance. Number one, on D6 of your packet. So the first motion will be findings of fact, and variance request number one. And it's important to establish because it's the basis for the conclusion. And also there's some, Chairman and members of the board, I need to note also, so it'd be where it says staff has provided on page D6, where it says note the language is similar to condition number 6 and 7. It's only condition number 6. I apologize for that error.
Mr. Chair, regarding variance number one, I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings of fact as presented by staff for the variance from chapter 11H3C4.
I would second that motion.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I might attempt to make a motion in terms of the, and I don't know if we need to do it here or do it in the subdivision, but wanting some way to include the trail to be defined, the pedestrian trail to actually be developed and defined within that easement. Do we do that within this motion, or do we need to do it within the subdivision motion?
We have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
So are you proposing to amend?
I was proposing to amend the motion, sorry.
I would have to state, Chairman and members of the board, that we probably could do that during the condition for the subdivision. The variances are totally, they're very straightforward as far as what the applicant has requested. I would rather move and add something in.
Thank you, that's fine.
Thank you.
I withdraw that amendment.
Any discussion on the item? Okay, then let's go ahead and move forward with a roll call vote. Mr. Lavalley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll list your names and go around the room and you can vote aye or nay in regard to the findings of fact as presented by staff. Mr. Canal.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Schwinn.
Aye.
Mrs. Steinbeck.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
And Mr. Chair, we have Quinlan O'Connor is actually still is also participating via Zoom. And so he's unmuted, Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
And motion passes unanimously for the findings of fact as presented by staff. And Mr. Chair, next up in this consideration for this variance is a consideration of the criteria for granting variances. There are 4 criteria. You'll see them listed on Mrs. Diedrich's staff report under conclusions on page D6. Currently, those criteria, you'll see they are written in support against the variance. So they're written that they will not comply. The granting of the variance will be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare or injurious to other adjoining properties because of the particular physical surrounding shape or topographical conditions of this specific property involved in undue hardship to the owner would not result if these regulations were enforced. 3, the granting of the variance will cause a substantial increase in public costs. And 4, the approval of the variance will place this subdivision in non-conformance with adopted regulations. The draft motion before you again is in the affirmative. That the proposed variance does comply with those 4 criteria. So as written, would be detrimental, would result if these regulations were enforced, would not cause a substantial increase, and would not place the subdivision in non-conformance with adopted regulations. And I don't know where you're going with this variance. If the variance were to fail, the motion would fail. Or that's what would have to happen in the motion too. A motion would have to be made that it complies with that, and then that motion would have to fail. If the variance were to be approved, that motion would have to be done successful, as was the last motion on the findings. You could also take a shot at making it simpler.
Yeah.
So just to be, I'll reiterate one more time, and I'll hopefully be more clear. There's a draft motion before you. It doesn't have to be the motion made by this board, but it's to adopt a conclusion that the 4 criteria for granting variances can be met, and you could recommend approval of that variance. Okay, so that would elicit a second, and then there could be discussion, and that motion could be successful, which would, after voted on, could be successful, which would result in the variance being approved, or that motion could fail, which would result in the variance being denied.
If we want the variance to be approved, we approve the motion. If we do not want the variance to be approved, we vote against the motion, the example motion.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that is absolutely correct. Thank you for simplifying.
Mr. Chairman, let me find where I put it here. I move that the board adopt a conclusion that the proposed variance from chapter 11 H3C4 complies with the board criteria for granting variances from the standards and requirements of the subdivision regulations, and recommends approval of the variance application.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
It's now open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, if the variance fails, then the applicant will have to pave the access roads. That's the variance we're voting on, correct? Or is it the variance for the right of way?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, right now what you're looking at is the right of way.
The right of way, okay, thank you. And the right of way, excuse me, one more clarification, only applies to phase 4. The variance only applies to phase 4.
No, this is the offsite, so it'd be for 2 and 3. This is 2 and 3. where, I'll go back to that slide.
Okay, that's okay, I understand.
Okay.
So, further discussion on the motion, then if we would only want the right of way, 60-foot right of way to apply to phase 4, that requires a separate motion.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, it already is 60-foot right away on the plat when he actually goes and dedicates that through recordation.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I'll call the question.
Mr. McDonough?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I will state your names and then you can vote. Mr. Canal,
Nay.
Mr. Dean,
Nay.
Mrs. Anderson,
Nay.
Ms. Schwinn, Mrs. Steinbeck,
Nay.
and Mr. O'Connor, who is on Zoom.
Nay.
Mr. Chair,
Nay.
Mr. Chair, the motion failed, and the result of the variance being denied. As recommended by this board. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you do have a second variance for consideration. Variance number 2. This would be the variance from the requirement to pave the roads providing future interconnectivity within the subdivision.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so on page D10, your findings of fact are listed there, so your first motion would be based on those. Again, I apologize, I numbered it 1, 2, 5, and 6, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept the findings of fact as presented by staff for the variance from chapter 11H1.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Item is open for discussion. No discussion, Mr. McNally?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, are you ready to vote? Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll state your name and you can vote. Mr. Canal,
Aye.
Nay.
Mr. Dean, Mrs. Anderson,
Aye.
Mrs. Schwinn,
Nay.
Mrs. Steinbeck,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Nay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion to accept the findings of fact as presented by staff passes 4-3.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt a conclusion that the proposed variance from chapter 11.H.1 complies with the 4 criteria for granting variances from the standards and requirements of the subdivision regulation and recommends approval of the variance application.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion is open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if this variance fails, will the applicant still construct a gravel road to county standards?
If it, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay, if the motion fails, then that means that the applicant will have to develop a paved road. If the motion passes, I should have stated my question slightly, if the motion passes, will the applicant develop a road up to county, a gravel road up to county standards on those two roads?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so if the application for this variance is denied, they will have to pave to typical 2, which is paved roads. The 2 abutting the south and the west. If you approve the variance, then they are allowed to do the south and west connectors and gravel, which is the typical section.
If the, Mr. Chair, if the motion passes, you will have to then come in, there won't be a requirement to do any improvement to this road or these roads. You'll have to come in and do some amendments to your conditions. So if the motion passes, we do have some language that we can allow. We will present to you to show you how that would work. And it would require, and you could do a requirement for gravel surfacing on those future road and connectivity linkages.
Thank you. I'm torn on this one. I think with the lot size and the internal characteristics of the subdivision, those roads ought to be paved. On the other hand, I don't know what kind of development will exist south and west. I don't know whether we'll have ongoing dense development that requires a paved road. And so I guess I'd like the thoughts of my fellow board members because I'm torn.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to weigh in on that because initially I was thinking that it probably made sense to go ahead and pave those, but upon reflection and hearing from the developer, the engineer this evening, it seems kind of silly. They aren't very long sections. They aren't really roads. They're going to be dirt or gravel. They will be constructed, but with fences or not really knowing what's going to happen and what those connections are. And then I just have to say, I don't really think we should be paving something just because we ought to pave it, because we're anticipating future use. My preference would be somehow that the road is, that it's developed, and then I wish we had a way to ensure that if there is another development that occurs adjacent to it where we want to have a connector road, somehow, then it's paved. But when it's not being used, it seems environmentally unsound for us to be requiring that it's actually paved if it's just a parcel of property that's sitting there that's wrapped.
Any further board discussion?
I'm kind of torn on this issue too, I guess I could say, but I just feel that if the roads were allowed to be constructed with gravel, that we're kind of setting ourselves up for issues down the road. There's certainly both sides of the conversation, but I just fear that there's future problems by graveling those roads and not paving them today.
I think we need to remember that they aren't roads yet. That's a little, for me, that's somewhat of the difference. It's not really a road at this moment. It's potentially a future road, but only if there's other development that occurs adjacent that requires a road.
But there are
Not
4
many.
lots that may use those sections of road to access their property somehow.
Maybe like an alley.
Maybe they have a garage that's active. I don't know what the covenants or anything require, but a person could potentially build a garage and access it off of one of those.
But that is going to be a lot of traffic on the road necessarily.
But it would create dust for them and their neighbors potentially. A lot of considerations either way on that one.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Canal, just so you know, I believe Ms. Diedrich pointed out in the conditions of approval, there is a recommendation on these roads for future interconnectivity, but there's a no access restriction placed on the plat. So these lots that are adjacent to these roads wouldn't have access to that road, those roads. They would be asked to access onto the internal road network in the center of the division of land. So we wouldn't anticipate internal traffic on those roads until and unless future land gets developed, where then we'll utilize that interconnectivity.
Thank you for that clarification, that helps.
Can you restate the motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, the motion would be, and if you wanted to read it, it's, I believe it's on page D8, is it no, D10 of your packet. And it would be, which page is it?
This is Diedrich, I believe it's one slide behind where you're at, Carol. Or if you go back to your slide. Keep going.
Sorry, there's the motion. So what page is it on? Not on D10, on D8.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we don't have the draft motions in the actual staff report, we just have them up on your screen, because these are just draft motions recommended for the board to
So-
consider.
This would be a motion to adopt a conclusion that the proposed variance from chapter 11.h.1 complies with the 4 criteria for granting variance from the standards and requirements of the subdivision regulations and recommends approval of the variance application. So that would mean that paving, if this motion passed, that would mean paving would not be required. That's correct, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, it would be
Mr. O'Connor?
Sorry, so I mean, the sound just cut out a few seconds ago, so I couldn't hear anything. And also, if the host could allow me to unmute myself so I could speak up when I would like to, that would be helpful. So I don't know what I don't know what you just said, is I guess what that really boils down to.
Sure.
And if you're speaking, I still can't hear anything.
We'll see. Okay, Mr. Mr. Chairman, members of the board,
Recess will reconvene at 7:45.
Can you hear me?
Barely, it's like buzzing at me. I don't know what's going on. I can try calling in.
I was suggesting calling.
I'm assuming you agreed with me. I'll leave here and I'll call in.
So, this is the subdivision condition.
So, okay, if it's that, it has to be slow.
And I think in your discussion before you.
It wouldn't let me unmute myself on the phone, so I don't know what the issue was.
So, Bill, I think you hear me now.
No, it's doing the same buzzing thing. I don't know what happened. This is all new. I mean, the first, until that moment, everything was going just fine.
Same doesn't go. Okay, how is that? Sure.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I cannot hear anything right now.
You can't hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. You sound perfect. Okay,
Okay.
Karen. Hello. I'm good.
How's it going?
Pretty good. It's a bit hot today.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. Karen, can you say something into one of those microphones? Let's see if we hear that grinding sound. Ooh.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Okay, so how much longer is your meeting going?
A while. We
Okay,
have
good.
another agenda item.
Okay, perfect. So I can be there in about 5 minutes. And I think it'll take us probably about 5 minutes to figure it out. So, I mean, I'm being super optimistic, but I'm optimistic and I believe in myself. So, Karen, I'm going to be right there. Okay, dude? I'm on my way. All right. Bye, guys. I think you're saying good, but I can't really tell what you're saying. I'll be right there. Okay, bye.
Mr. Chairman, members of the
Well, apparently it's not just, so then that means it has to be.
Quinn.
Greg, were you trying to talk to me?
I was just testing to see if you could hear me.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing that it's been doing.
Pardon me? Yes?
We have a backup recording, right? Okay.
I'm glad you came over because I wouldn't.
I think you might have.
Like you would be healing. Yeah, it's very, I feel very safe with you.
Peter.
say, I don't have my hearing aids in, so I won't be able to hear much. So you text Ryan this?
I don't have personal stuff.
Yeah. I don't think I do either. You check the stack, but
Karen? Okay, and then you want me to have them log out and re-log in? Is that what you want me to do? Okay. Okay, so I will try to tell everybody. All right, thanks. Hello, this is Peter Italiano. I'm on the Zoom call for tonight's planning board meeting. Not sure if the other Zoom callers can hear me, but we are experiencing technical difficulties and we are waiting for an IT representative. We should be here within a few minutes. So if you can bear with us, and I will get back to you once it's either fixed or we may need to take some other action. Okay, thank you.
oh my gosh, Ryan, I wasn't sure if that would be your phone. Well, I came down here. I came down here. Oh, I shut my. Spencer from the King has your phone number. We do have a new idea and plan for this room, just so everyone knows, we are working on getting a better plan for the sound in here. Okay. And then when you outside. It works fine. Great. So you. Right, yeah, I mean, really. Absolutely. Perfect. Agree. Exactly. Second. Is it you know like?
Well, Quinlan hasn't told me whether or not he heard me,
Oh,
and I've sent him back 2 emails, which I also sent to you.
so we've.
I did say I heard you in the first one, but yes, I heard you, and now I can hear you this time fine too.
Okay,
Oh, great.
so we've, made you the co-host. And we're gonna log off, and restart Karen's computer.
So what do you need me to do?
Nothing, except for probably make Karen the host again once she logs back in. And so, turn on your screen. There you go. You're gonna watch for, she's gonna go away. Watch for her to go away. This commission chambers, yep.
Okay.
She's just gonna go away. And then you're gonna, after she goes away, she's gonna rejoin. And you're gonna wanna admit her, and then
Okay.
I will show you, I'll come back down to show you
Okay.
the host her.
All right. Because I couldn't hear anything in the hearing room.
Right.
Okay.
Same. And we can hear you.
I'm not judging you. The first one we did,
Okay. So can you hear me at all on your phone? Very well.
You haven't let me in the room. I'm not in the room.
I can't let you in the room because
And
I'm.
it's showing up on that.
Yeah.
Okay, go to share screen.
show me the photos, to show me the tweeters, how the photos. I need that person to let me in over here. No, not here.
Oh, this one's not here. Nope. Sorry. I see your mouse.
Good luck.
So, someone did unmute me. At some point. Probably Peter. Okay, can he also make me a host? Peter, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Julia, I can hear you.
Does it sound like grinding terribleness?
No,
So it
it's a
sounds,
little echoey, but I can deal with that.
okay, how about like this? Is this better?
No, not really.
Is it worse?
Yeah, but again, I can hear, so I'll put up with whatever as long as I can hear it all.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
That sounds very far away.
Okay, I'm getting it on here. Okay, you are. Can you hear me? Does it sound like kind of grinding gears or interference or craziness? No, it's echoey. It's echoey. Okay, so we are having a problem with echoiness, so we are submitting microphones and they are on the way. We're hoping for very soon. Very sorry.
My son is in Bozeman and he can hear.
He can hear you. Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna kind of hang out. In the hallway.
Do I need to be on Zoom on this computer?
We obey. Let's make sure logged in.
GDP staff. Do I need to be on this computer? But you're on, like Karen's,
Karen is on.
I'm gonna disconnect.
Oh, so you're already on there as a co-host.
Yeah, I don't need to be on there.
You don't need to show or display anything.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you need to share your screen. Share what you'd like.
And I think I've been waiting my car with my laptop so I can literally hear it.
It's not a little over down here. There's a lot of electronics in there.
I feel like we have.
You feel like it's good? Again? Okay.
You gonna hang out for a bit?
Huh?
You hang out for a bit?
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out just in case something weird happens. I'll be. Thank you. Around the corner. Nice day. Oh, yeah, that's good. So, you're all set? Please stay. Ryan said your sound was great. Thank you. Okay. I don't want you to get. Thank you.
The planning board meeting is now back in session. We're resuming our discussion on the motions for variance number 2.
Mr. Chairman, if this motion, passes and the variance is granted to construct a gravel road, I intend to provide a motion that that gravel road be constructed to county standard. That be one of the conditions of, I just want to know that I would.
So you're proposing an amendment?
No, I'm not. I'm telling you that if this motion is granted, I intend to offer another motion.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so we did, staff did draft, if you did want to approve, the variance. So the second I, so we would strike out the original verbiage and then we would add additional, the second I, which would, allow the variance to be constructed to local section 1, which is the gravel standard for the subdivision regulations.
Mr. Chairman, I call the question.
Mr. McNally. We have a call for a vote on the motion.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion is to adopt the conclusion that the proposed variance from chapter 11H1 complies with the 4 criteria for granting variances from the standards and requirements of the subdivision regulations and recommend approval of the variance application. If this motion passes, the variance will be approved. If the motion fails, the variance will be denied. I will list off the names of the board members and you can vote. Mr. Kamal.
Nay.
Mr. Dean.
Nay.
Mrs. Anderson. Mrs. Swin.
Aye.
Mrs. Sterling.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Nay.
Mr. Chair.
Nay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion fails. The variance is denied.
Mr. Chair, members of the board.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, the motion failed. And the motion was to adopt the conclusion that the variance complies with the 4 criteria. I just want to make sure I'm doing this correctly. I'm a little discombobulated from our sound difficulties. And so the motion did not pass. Therefore,
What was the vote tally, Mr.
the vote tally was 4 nays, 3 ayes. So the motion did not pass.
If staff could put up the next motion to require that the gravel road be constructed to town and county standards, I would appreciate it.
So, Madam Chair, the motion didn't pass, so the variance was denied. So we have already a recommendation in place for conditions of approval, which would require all the roads internal to the subdivision, including these and future connectivity roads, be paved. So we're now requiring, or you're recommending that all roads be paved.
That's what we just passed.
I'm sorry.
That's what we just denied the variance, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, Mr. B.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so the next would be a motion on the subdivision application.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the finding of facts as presented by staff for the entire subdivision.
Is there a second? Second. Open for discussion? There any more discussion? Okay, let's move to vote. Mr. McNally, please. Sorry, hold on. Wait.
Just 1 second, I want to know where we can find the, where in our packet specifically we can find this impact.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mrs. Diedrich has them in her packet. They begin on page 6 of 27 of the staff report.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I will call the question.
Mr. McNally, let's proceed with the vote.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the motion is to accept the findings of fact as presented by staff. I'll state your names and call for a vote. Mr. Khan.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Nay.
Mrs. Schwinn,
Nay.
Mrs. Steinbeck,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Nay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion to accept the findings of fact passes 4-3. Mr. Chairman, members of the staff, the next motion would be to consider that there are adverse impacts to adopt a conclusion that the proposed subdivision will have adverse impacts on the impact criteria. It requires a conclusion to have adverse impacts if the desire is to provide conditions to the subdivision.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adopt the conclusion that the proposed Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 will have adverse impacts on the impact criteria.
Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Motion's open for discussion. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I call the question.
Mr. McNally, let's move to vote.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the motion is to adopt a conclusion that the proposed Wheat Ridge Estates Phase 4 will have adverse impacts on the impact criteria. I'll read your names, state your names and vote. Mr. Canal.
Aye.
Mr. Dean. Aye. Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Schwinn.
Aye.
Mrs. Steinbeck.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes 7-0.
And Ms. McNally, is that our last item?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you've made a motion on the findings of fact, you've made a motion on that there are adverse impacts based on those findings of fact. The next motion would be to consider a motion to adopt a conclusion that those adverse impacts of the proposed subdivision can be mitigated through the conditions of approval as presented by staff. This motion, if it's successful, would result in a conditional approval of the subdivision. If it's made, it would be at this point where after a second, if there was any changes to the conditions, the board could entertain those individually.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that the subdivision be approved with the recommended conditions of approval that start on page 15 of the board package.
Is there a second?
Second.
Items open for discussion. Is there any board discussion? Hearing no board discussion, Mr. McNally will move to vote.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion was to move that the subdivision be recommended for approval subject to the conditions included in the staff report. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll state your name, you can vote. Mr. Canal.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Nay.
Mrs. Schwinn.
Nay.
Mrs. Steinbeck.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Nay.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes 4-3. Under the direction of the motions, the board has now made a motion on findings of fact, as recommended by the staff. Motion that there are adverse impacts on the subdivision, and made a motion to recommend approval of the subdivision, and that approval be subject to the conditions outlined by staff in their report. That will conclude this item.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. During the break, we realized in our enthusiasm to get started with the agenda, we overlooked a couple of important items. Number one is introductions of the board. I'm Gregory Thomas, Chair.
I am Ann Schwan, Vice Chair.
I'm Margaret Anderson, City Representative.
Dennis Dean, County Representative.
Corey Kellogg, County Representative.
Lois Steinbeck, County Representative.
So my turn. I'm Quinlan O'Connor. I'm a city representative.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And now move on to approval of minutes for May 19th, June 16th, and June 25th. Mr. McDowell.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we were ambitiously anticipating having these minutes prepared for you. We do have draft versions of these minutes prepared, but they have not yet been fully vetted by our staff in comparison to the audio, so we did not have them ready for you. So I would request that you table this item until your following meeting, which we hope to have those minutes prepared in advance of your meeting for you to review and consider.
So we'll move those items to September 15th, right?
Mr. Chair, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that out of the way, we will move to our second public item, which is the Grasslands Estates Subdivision 4. Presentation by Mr. Spencer Stark, who will present the staff report. Before staff presents their report, we'd like the applicant or the applicant's representative to state if they have received a copy of the staff report and if they are ready to proceed. Is Mr. Cassidy, am I pronouncing that correct?
The applicant is Grasslands Estates, which is owned by Ms. Nolan. That's the applicant.
Hi. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, so Ms. Knoll, okay, because it said there was going to be a representative. Okay, so Ms. Knoll, if you would please, as a formality, please state your name and address for the record.
Beth Knoll at 21 North Last Chance Gulch, Helena, Montana.
And have you received a copy of the staff report?
Yes.
Okay, and are you ready to proceed with this evening's public hearing on your subdivision application and variance applications?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stark, are you ready to begin?
Good afternoon, Commissioner, Chair Thomas, planning board members. Before you today is a major subdivision to be known as Grasslands 4. The subdivision is located south of Mountain Road and east of Shenandoah Lane. It's located north of Helena proper. The proposal is for a 51 residential lot subdivision with 2 utility lots and 1 park lot. Before you is the proposed preliminary plat demonstrating the lot layout of the 51 residential lots, the 2 utility lots and the 1 parkland lot. The applicant is proposing to use existing water facilities located in the first Grasslands subdivision and currently owned and operated by the HOA. The applicant would extend the system to the lots, proposed lots in the proposed subdivision. Wastewater would use a combination of the existing drain field, public drain field, as well as an expansion of that drain field, the 2 raised sand mounds on the new utility lots created in this subdivision. I'll wait for. The fire protection system would again be utilizing an existing off-site fire protection source. The fire protection source is part of the aforementioned public water supply system. In order to comply with county subdivision regulations, the applicant is proposing to extend the off-site fire protection system to 2 hydrants spaced 1,000 road feet apart, again, to comply with our existing fire protection regulations. The fire protection system is currently maintained by the existing HOA, and the applicant has proposed that these lots be added to that HOA, which is within the parameters of the current bylaws. Access is proposed off of Carmen Road and Munger Road via the internal, the proposed internal road network. And then, as mentioned previously, the applicant is proposing to dedicate parkland. The requirement, based on the densities and lot sizes of this proposed development, would be for 2.2 acres. The applicant is proposing the dedication of 2.21 acres. And this parkland dedication received approval from the Parks Board. In addition, before this meeting, the applicant's engineer requested a change to condition 8 on page 15. This condition is for the utility easements on the certificate of survey to be completed, and specifically a notation in that condition for including a 10-foot by 10-foot utility easement in each location adjacent to the public right-of-way where utilities are present. This just is a better clarification of what the intention of that condition is, and staff supports the proposed amendment. At this time, that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is available in the audience, and I believe Ryan Kasdan, the applicant's engineer, is available on Zoom, and staff is also available for further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Do board members have any questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Knoll, this is your opportunity to present your comments regarding the staff report, draft findings of fact, and draft conditions. Do you have any further comments to add? No. Okay.
Excuse me, this is Ryan Kasdan. Can I take that on behalf of Beth, please?
Will we have him come in now, or will we open it to public testimony?
Mr. Kasdan is Ms. Knoll's representative, and he can speak for Ms. Knoll.
Okay, Mr. Kasdan, go ahead, please.
All right, good evening, members of Consolidated Planning Board. I'm Ryan Kasdan. Kasdan and Associates Incorporated, 664 Logan Street. I am Beth's engineer and consultant on the project. First of all, I want to thank the staff. Spencer did what I consider to be an excellent job with the staff report and the recommendation, or the recommended conditions of approval. If I can just talk about a couple of small things in the staff report, I want to shed a little bit of light on. Page 3 talks about the lots being part of the HOA or the requirement to form an RID to maintain the fire system. And I just want to make clear that the HOA and Beth Knoll and myself have conversed extensively about this final phase of the development. The HOA is a well put together group, and they are very willing to take these lots under the umbrella of the HOA, where the lots developed within this subdivision, with the exception of the parkland lots, will all pay into the HOA dues, and the HOA right now does own, operate, and maintain the fire suppression system. I also spoke with the fire chief, Jerry Shepard. It's a system that performs well and that he's pleased with. So condition number 12, I'm fine with the way it's written right now, but the expectation here is that an RID will not need to be created for this final phase of the subdivision to maintain and operate the fire system. It will simply be an extension of the existing HOA development. Page 6, I was going to touch on briefly, but Spencer did a nice job with that, and the fact that staff has accepted our recommendation of the condition of approval modification that just simply states that where utilities are located, such as junction boxes and transformers, specifically for Northwestern Energy, we will be happy to provide them with a 10x10 easement so that they can adequately install and maintain that infrastructure. Page 7 of the staff report, I'm really pleased to see that the park board made a decision to approve the parkland dedication for this subdivision. I don't see that a lot, and I wish I saw it more. I think this will be a park that will well serve this development. You know, we're over 130 lots now, and it was definitely time to create parkland. So I am 100% in support of that. I don't have really anything else. Like I say, the report was excellent, the conditions were excellent. If there's any questions for Beth or I, of course, we're happy to answer, but she's excited and I'm excited to finish this development. It's a beautiful development in the Helena Valley, and all others should look more like it, in my opinion. So if you have any questions further on in the meeting, I'm glad to unmute and jump back in, but thank you for each and every board member for your participation. This is a burden, as you know, and well, you can feel right now at 8:40 at night that you guys are doing good work out there, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Cassidy? Okay, hearing none, we are ready to accept public testimony. Seeing no one in the chambers for public testimony, do we have anyone on Zoom with a hand raised? Thank you, Ms. Rutherford. Why don't we give another 10, 15 seconds just to make sure. Just to reiterate, if you are on Zoom or on the phone, and if you dialed in and would like to make a comment, please press *9 to raise your hand. And when you hear the prompt, you have been unmuted, please begin to speak. Do we have anyone yet, Ms. Rutherford? Okay. Hearing no further public comment, the public testimony period is closed, and we'll go back to the board discussion with any questions for staff. Okay, we appear to have no further board questions for staff. So we will move on to motions for the subdivision application. Would anyone like to present a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings of fact as presented by staff.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
Motion is open for discussion. Okay, hearing no discussion, Mr. McNally, we are ready for a vote.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, motion is to accept the findings of fact as presented by staff. I will state every board member's name in the vote. Mr. Canal.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Schwinn.
Aye.
Mrs. Steinberg.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, motion passes 7-0 to accept the findings of fact as presented by staff.
Okay, and we'll now move on for motions about any potential adverse impacts.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt a conclusion that the proposed grasslands 4 will have adverse impacts on impact criteria.
Is there a second? Second. Motion is open for discussion. Hearing no board discussion, Mr. McNally, we are ready for a vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the motion is to adopt a conclusion that the proposed grasslands 4 will have adverse impacts on the impact criteria. I'll state every board member's name for a vote. Mr. Canal.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Schwinn.
Aye.
Mrs. Stopper.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion to, regarding the adverse impacts that there are adverse impacts on the subdivision has passed 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. We'll now move on to the next motion item for mitigation of adverse impacts and conditional approval. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to recommend a conclusion that adverse impacts of the proposed grasslands 4 can be mitigated through the conditions of approval presented by staff.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Motion is open for discussion. Hearing no discussion, Mr. McDowell, we're ready for vote, please.
Mr. Chair, I would advise or remind the board that Mr. Stark shared with you a request by the applicant to amend some of the conditional language. And Mr. Stark can bring that up on the screen as regarding, I believe, one of the conditions, if this is something that the board would like to consider doing, it was something requested by the applicant. And as Mr. Stark had indicated, it was supported by staff. Mr. Stark, could you direct the board to the condition number 8 so they could see that condition and how this language would reflect into that condition? Just to make sure that, I wanted to make sure that we covered that in consideration.
As noted on the slide, it is condition 8 found on page 15, specifically provision A of that condition and the notation at the end of that provision. Currently, it reads, including a 10-foot by 10-foot utility easement on each lot adjacent to the right-of-way easement. This clarifies that statement and making sure that those easements exist only where utilities are to be present.
Is there a motion supporting the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we amend the motion that's on the floor to change condition 8 on page 15 to include this statement. Note, including a 10 by 10 foot utility easement in each location adjacent to the public right of way where utilities are present.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion's the amendment to the motion discussion. Okay. There is no discussion. Then we will go ahead and vote on the amendment to the motion. Mr. McDowell?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion was to recommend a conclusion that the adverse impacts of the proposed grasslands 4 can be mitigated through conditions of approval presented by staff and as recommended by staff with the amendment to condition number 8 as stated by board member Steinbeck and seconded by Anderson. I'll state each board member's name for a vote. Mr. Kamala.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Schwint.
Aye.
Mrs. Steinbeck.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the motion passes 7-0 for conditional approval of the grasslands 4 subdivision subject to the findings of fact, conditions of approval as recommended by staff, the staff report, as well as the amendment presented by staff during tonight's presentation. And that will conclude this item.
Okay, moving on to item E, other business. Mr. McNally, do we have other business this evening?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the planning staff has no other business for you at this time.
Any planning board members have any other business to discuss? Okay, hearing none. Our next scheduled meeting, Mr. McNally, please correct me if I'm mistaken, is September 15th at 6 p.m. in Commission Chambers.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that is correct. And again, I apologize to you for the technical difficulties we have tonight. I appreciate your patience and your understanding as we proceeded to fix that issue. And again, I will reiterate, Mrs. Carroll, our IT professional, that we are continuing to look to improve this situation for everybody.
Many thanks to Ms. Carroll for coming to the rescue this evening regarding our technical difficulties.
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman,
Dunbar.
thank you. Before we move on, can we have kind of a preview of what you expect we're going to be looking at for the agenda on our next meeting?
Mr. Chairman, we are currently have a few subdivisions in the hopper that we're reviewing for sufficiency, and we have not yet deemed those sufficient, is my understanding. So if we were to deem those sufficient, we would have a few more subdivisions for you for this first September's meeting.
Could we perhaps have a bit more clarity about what a few represents?
So Mr. Stark can speak to the number here we've got. I'm sorry.
So it's a nuanced question. So we have 4 subdivisions that have been applied for concurrently that are adjacent to one another. And as we move forward, the reason for that will come to light. And then the 5th one is a major subdivision of the North Valley.
So 5, a few to 5. The 4 of those 5, it's going to be kind of they're all adjacent to each other, and it'll be a different approach to our review of those 4 applications than what we've seen in the past. So
They all count.
those would be all county subdivisions, Mr. King. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I actually do have one other item of business that I had mentally prepared in my head and then let it go. But I want to recognize some of our board members whose terms are coming to an end, particularly Mr. Corkinal, who is present with us tonight. As you all know, this being serving as a board is a long drawn out process. It's maybe not as rewarding as you initially signed up for. I hope you find reward in it. And certainly, Mr. Kanal has been shared his part in doing many things for both the city and the county. We've amended subdivision regulations. We've adopted growth policies for both the city and the county. Countless subdivisions and other recommendations. And I just wanted to recognize Mr. Kanal for his service. And his term is expiring here on the 1st of September. So we've also heard from, and Mr. Kanal, give you a moment, but I also want to recognize Mrs. Kate Miller, who, as you know, wasn't able to be present with us for much of the summer as we proceeded with our zoning. Ms. Miller had some issues that she was, personal issues that she was addressing. She's indicated to us that she's no longer really or interested in continuing because she doesn't want to, she's afraid those personal issues will infringe on her ability to serve on the board. So I also want to recognize Ms. Miller for her service and her continued presence throughout these years. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Greg. I just wanted to recognize the city and county staff. You guys really do an amazing job. You do an incredible amount of work, and you do a really good job helping guide our board and doing our job, our duties here. And I feel very fortunate to have worked with you guys. I feel very fortunate to have worked with a whole variety of fellow board members over the years. Very dedicated people, very smart group of people, and I appreciate everything that we all do here. Good luck, guys. Keep up the good work.
That concludes staff's other business. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other board comments before we move to our last agenda item? Okay, we're now opening for public comment on any public matter within the jurisdiction of the Consolidated City and County Planning Board that is not on the agenda. Since we have no public commenters in chambers, Ms. Rutherford, do we have anyone on Zoom with hand raised? Okay, just one last time. If you have joined by dialing in and you would like to make a comment, please press *9 to raise your hand. And when you hear the prompt, you can start speaking. We'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, hearing no public comment, this meeting is adjourned.